Seven of Nine's character couldn't have happened without Dr. Beverly Crusher in Star Trek: The Next Generation. When Star Trek Voyager introduced Seven of Nine in Season 4, the series gained one of the franchise's most complex and compelling characters. A former Borg drone liberated from the collective, Seven's struggle to reclaim her individuality and humanity became a rich vein of storytelling. But while Jerry Ryan's portrayal and the show's writing made Seven unforgettable, her existence in the Star Trek universe owes much to a character who came before her, Dr. Beverly Crusher of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Without Dr. Crusher's precedent in TNG, both in universe and from a production standpoint, Seven's nuanced, empathy-driven arc would have been far harder to envision and perhaps impossible to execute. Beverly's influence is felt in the way Starfleet approaches rehabilitation, in how Star Trek handles stories of identity and trauma, and in the very willingness to center the narrative on a woman whose journey is both cerebral and emotional. Beverly Crusher's quiet revolution. When The Next Generation launched in 1987, Dr. Beverly Crusher was not the most flamboyant or controversial member of the crew. Yet her presence as the Enterprise's chief medical officer subtly reshaped the possibilities for female characters in Star Trek. In a franchise that had often celebrated warriors, captains, and explorers, Beverly represented a different type of strength, one rooted in compassion, intellect, and moral conviction. Crusher was a healer first, but she wasn't passive. She stood up to Captain Picard when ethics demanded it, challenged Starfleet's political compromises, and insisted on seeing the individual behind every patient, even those deemed irredeemable. Beverly's approach to medicine wasn't just about treating injuries or curing diseases. It was about restoring dignity. This philosophy would become critical to the way Voyager handled Seven of Nine, the Borg connection. Beverly's early work. Seven of Nine's origins are inextricably tied to the Borg, and long before Voyager's Delta Quadrant adventures, Dr. Crusher helped shape Starfleet's early understanding of the collective. In the TNG episode, I, Borg, Beverly is one of the first to treat an injured Borg drone, later named Hugh, as more than just an enemy machine. The episode's central conflict revolves around whether to use Hugh as a biological weapon against the collective or to restore his autonomy. Beverly's unwavering position is clear. He is a patient in her care, and she will not allow Starfleet to exploit him. That moment is groundbreaking because it reframes the Borg from a faceless threat to a collection of individuals robbed of choice. Beverly's humanity toward Hugh challenges Picard and the entire crew to see past the fear and devastation the Borg represent. Without that moral precedent, the idea of rehabilitating a fully assimilated adult like Seven of Nine might have been unthinkable. Setting the stage for a rehabilitation narrative, Starfleet's handling of Borg survivors in Voyager feels like a direct continuation of the philosophy Beverly embodied in TNG. By the time Voyager encounters Seven in Scorpion, Part 2, Captain Janeway is willing to attempt her liberation, not solely as a tactical necessity, but as an act of mercy. That's because, in universe, Starfleet medical officers like Crusher have already shown that reclamation is possible, and that the ethical path is to try. Seven's journey from Borg drone to human individual mirrors many of the principles Beverly fought for. Treat the person, not the label. Crusher refused to define Hugh by his Borg identity, just as Janeway and the Doctor refused to see Seven only as a threat. Respect autonomy. Beverly argued against using Hugh without his consent, paralleling the way Voyager eventually allows Seven to make her own choices, even when they conflict with the crew's preferences. Acknowledge trauma. Beverly's sensitivity to the psychological impact of assimilation foreshadows the care Seven receives during her transition. In short, Beverly provided the blueprint for how Starfleet and Star Trek as a franchise could tell a rehabilitation story without stripping the character of agency. Beverly's legacy in Star Trek's women. On a meta level, Beverly Crusher also laid important groundwork for the kinds of female characters Star Trek would dare to center. Before TNG, female characters in Star Trek often existed in supporting roles to male leads, with arcs that were episodic rather than serialized. Beverly was different. She had a professional identity that was not subordinate to a male character, her own ethical compass, and storylines that tackled complex moral dilemmas. Seven of Nine benefited from that shift. Voyager could give her a multi-season arc of identity, recovery, and belonging because the audience had already seen a woman in Star Trek carry philosophical and emotional weight on par with her male colleagues. Beverly Crusher proved that a woman could anchor morally challenging stories, and that the fandom would embrace it. Emotional intelligence as a narrative tool, Seven's growth is as much about her emotional awakening as it is about physical liberation from the Borg. She learns to form friendships, to navigate interpersonal conflicts, and to understand concepts like love and individuality. These are deeply human themes, and Voyager treats them with sincerity rather than dismissing them as soft subplots. Beverly's tenure on the Enterprise normalized this. She frequently brought emotional intelligence into Starfleet's decision-making, reminding Picard and others that strategic choices have human costs. Her influence on how the franchise approaches emotional stakes meant that Voyager could let Seven struggle with feelings without undermining her strength. The Doctor-Seven relationship as a Beverly echo, the dynamic between Seven of Nine and the Doctor on Voyager bears more than a passing resemblance to Beverly Crusher's relationship with her patients, and occasionally with Data in TNG. Beverly was often the one to guide Data through human social customs, patiently explaining emotions, ethics, and human behavior. Similarly, the Doctor becomes Seven's guide through her rehumanization. He coaches her on social graces, helps her navigate moral choices, and provides a safe space for her to experiment with individuality. In many ways, he is carrying forward Beverly's model of care, a blend of medical skill, mentorship, and respect for the patient's identity. Breaking the cold professional trope, one of the reasons Seven's arc works is because she is allowed to be vulnerable without being diminished. That balance owes something to Beverly's characterization in TNG. Crusher was professional and competent, but she was also warm, approachable, and willing to show her own vulnerabilities. She could be deeply empathetic without losing authority, a quality that informed how Voyager could write Seven as both formidable and emotionally complex. Without Beverly's example, there might have been more pressure to portray Seven as either entirely detached, leaning into the Borg stereotype, or overly sentimental, undermining her intellect and strength. Instead, Seven could be written as a multifaceted character who defied simplistic categorization. Beverly Crusher's indirect role in Starfleet's cultural shift. It's worth noting that within Star Trek canon, Starfleet itself evolves across series. The Federation we see in Voyager is more open to rehabilitating former enemies than the one we meet in early TNG. Beverly's moral victories, from treating Hugh to advocating for medical ethics over political expedience,